welcome to the November 2019 edition of City Connections, the live television program with Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss with Community Media Center. I'm Linda Galash, your host. City Connection offers the community an opportunity to hear about efforts from City Hall and beyond, and also provide you the opportunity for questions and comments later in the program. Well, today we welcome to the show in studio Grand Rapids 2nd Ward Commissioner Ruth Kelly. Commissioner Kelly is serving out the final 2 months of her term on the City Commission due to term limits having begun in 2010. Kelly brings a unique view of Grand Rapids with her service on numerous committees, business associations, and foundations that she brought with her, as well as her time teaching in the public schools. We'll ask Kelly what she sees as some of the greater challenges and achievements for Grand Rapids from both her tenure and for the Commission looking to the future. Your opportunity to take part in the conversation comes in the second half of the show, and you can do that through email, cityconnection@grcmc.org. Twitter is @GRTV Access, and then you can comment on GRTV's Facebook page. City Connection is a collaboration between Community Media Center and the City of Grand Rapids, and we're broadcasting live today, November 4th, 2019, here on Community Access Television Channel 24, live streaming. Live at therapedian.org or on GRTV's Facebook page. We'll be rebroadcast that later throughout the month, and as you may have noticed, we're broadcasting actually live an hour earlier. We're doing this through the end of the year, so we're live today at 4 o'clock. Well, welcome to the show, Mayor Bliss, and much to talk about, but looking forward to having Commissioner Kelly with us shortly, but let's do some catch up on what's going on around here. A drastic notice in the weather change, and that always helps us remember that some things go in effect when the time changes and as well as the weather changes, including parking.
Yes, so thank you for starting with that. As we wake up to chillier mornings, and even now with the time change, it's a little bit darker earlier in the day, so it's a good reminder for folks to gear up and be prepared for winter. The big thing at the city is that we go into our odd-even enforcement for street parking in some of our neighborhoods, not all of them, but many of them. And it's interesting because this time of year I always get people call me and ask me, why do we do this? And we do it for a number of reasons. One, we start at November 1 so that our street sweepers have time to get the leaves off the street. We don't want those to end up in our catch basins as the snow starts to fall. Also, it makes it much more difficult to move the snow when you have piles of leaves. So our street sweepers are out in force. In fact, they were out all weekend. You'll see them over the next couple weeks as we gear up for the winter. So we need those cars moved so that they can get in and clean the streets in preparation for the snow. And then with the odd even parking, it helps our snow plows be able to get down and clear the street all the way up to the curb, which is really important, especially for some of those more narrow streets. We want to make sure that we're able to get all the way to the curb in the winter to keep those open. But a couple other reminders. I always remind residents that it is our own responsibility to shovel our sidewalks. So please make sure that you're shoveling your sidewalks. We want to make sure that those are clear for kids and families and anyone who needs to use them so that they're on the sidewalk and not in the street, which is dangerous. But that's our responsibility, and so please make sure that you're doing that. If you have a neighbor that needs help, that's always a nice time to reach out and help a neighbor.
Okay, and then the specific definition of the odd-even parking is that if today's date is the 4th, an even number, you can park on the even numbered side of the street or an address on that side of the street?
Yes. So it starts at midnight, and it starts at midnight and then goes till 6 a.m., I believe. I should know, I have a sign right in front of my house. So yeah, we ask that you look at that, and typically what happens is you can tell, like on my street, I have odd-even parking on my street. Typically by 9, 10 o'clock at night, most of the cars are on one side of the street. So it's pretty easy to tell which side of the street it's on, even just by looking at your neighbors usually.
Okay, so important for accessibility in a lot of ways, especially getting emergency vehicles down the street, that type of thing.
Yeah.
All right, well, some good news for the city when it comes to funding a couple projects, including Roberto Clemente Park received some state funding, a pretty good amount of funding, about $300,000 in state funds.
Yeah, this is just a recent pretty significant grant we got from the Michigan Department of Natural Trust Fund. So we've actually applied for those funds a number of times over the years. this is a significant one. It's contributing to about $1 million worth of investment that we're doing at the Roberto Clemente Park. We'll be doing a lot of upgrades there to bathrooms and drinking fountains and picnic tables, and we're making it more accessible. And the MD&R Trust Fund has been a great partner in a lot of this work. We can apply for grant funds not just for park acquisition, but also for park improvements. However, it requires a match. So I've had some people reach out to me and say, well, we should do everything with grant funding. Honestly, we'd never be able to do everything that we need to do in parks with just grant funding. And then you always have to have a match to go with those funds. So even in order to apply for the funds, you have to show that you have funds set aside that can pay for the additional costs of that project. But it's a great way to leverage state funds and grant money to invest and do more in our parks than we would be able to do without those dollars.
Okay, so $300,000, that means the city had to come up with an equal amount.
Yeah.
City general funds, city funds, or through private philanthropy, or how did that come about?
So these funds are through the Parks Millage.
Okay.
So the dedicated Parks Millage that was passed, and the vast majority of those funds go to capital improvements.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the latest. We talk almost every month about park improvement, and now on the slate. When will this start for Clemente Park?
Yeah, so we're hoping to get in the ground early next year. I think they're doing some preliminary work this year, but should be done hopefully by midsummer next year. Okay. And then one other park, it's not a city park, but it's county park, right here in your neck of the woods, is John Ball Zoo. Right. So the John Ball Park unveiled a beautiful new playground that is accessible. So that means it's available for people with disabilities.
Good sized park too, with a lot of acreage.
It's a nice sized park. Yeah.
All right, over here on the west side. Yeah. Some other funding for the city, approximately $4 million grant from HUD to address the hazard of lead paint in homes. Yeah,
I was so excited to see this. So the city for well over a decade, we have received funds from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, it's a federal department. They have funds set aside for lead remediation in homes. And we've applied for those funds, as I said, for well over a decade. But this grant, the $4.3 million, is the largest grant that we've ever received. And this will enable us to not only continue the work that we've done around lead remediation, but we'll be able to get to support remediation in many more homes because of the size of this grant. It also allows us to do education. So one thing that we just partnered with about a week ago with the county, with support from state funds and federal funds, as well as the City Commission put in $50,000, is that we launched a public awareness and education campaign around lead poisoning. So you'll start to see those billboards up and PSAs and messages out there about where to look for potential lead hazards. So we are really excited to be able to do that as well, and then to have that coupled with this grant that will allow us to do more lead remediation in homes is really a fabulous thing. How far do you think we are on addressing this here in the city of Grand Rapids? There's been some smaller funds that usually are exhausted pretty quickly, and this seems to be a pretty significant size one. It is. So the unfortunate thing is that the scale and scope of the problem is immense. So you're looking at how many homes in the city that were built before 1978 where you know that lead paint was utilized. So if you look at that, we still have tens of thousands of homes in the city that have not been remediated. And then the question is, do you really target your resources? So we're most concerned about homes where there's lead paint, where young children are living, and where there's lead hazards. And some homes have already replaced their windows. Windows tend to be where, when you open and close a window, where the lead dust the particles are occurring. And so what we're doing is we're looking at how many homes we still have left to do. Unfortunately, it's a lot. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I have them in my office. But then how do you really focus on where the families live? So for instance, I live in a home that was built in 1951. I have already replaced my windows, but I don't have young children in my home. I wouldn't be one of those high-risk homes that we want to target. We really want to target the older homes where we know families are living, and that just takes more work. Okay. Yeah. If somebody is a landlord or it's their home, what should they do? Who should they contact? They should call the city. So 311. Just call 311 and they will connect them with the Community Development Department, and then you can go through the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that information. Some great then new funding here for the city of Grand Rapids. Wanted to kind of dive into a couple city actions that have been out there recently, and one of them is about a couple of proposals for new ordinances, kind of revamping or maybe updating the weapons and noise control ordinances. And there's going to be a public hearing coming up a week from tomorrow.
Yes. So those are two separate ordinances. We'll have two separate public hearings on those at our evening meeting on November 12th. The most significant portion for the gun ordinance is that we added language around BB guns, pneumatic guns, fake guns, as some people call them. And the big issue is that sometimes when these pneumatic guns or replica guns are purchased, there is a orange tip around the front. And the unfortunate thing that happens is some people will take that orange tip off, or they'll color it in. And so it's very, very difficult to tell a real gun from a fake gun. And we've had incidents where police respond and it's extremely difficult to tell, and it becomes a dangerous situation if we think that someone has a real gun and it's a fake gun. So the language, the gun ordinance addresses that, but it also, before the ordinance would go into effect, we would do a lot of education around, with our community around what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how can we make sure that everyone is safe, and when is it appropriate to have a fake gun and not. So no brandishing in the public, that would not be allowed under the new ordinance.
Okay, so in a sense, it's a little bit modernizing. That orange tip was law at some point a few decades ago, and that's...
Under federal law, it's still federal law, but we're finding locally that it's, we've had a number of incidents where fake guns were lifted, where it's been removed or covered up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the noise...
And people need to know how dangerous that is.
Okay. Right, because somebody made approach a child, a youth with a toy gun that is not showing as a toy gun.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that, is it the same public hearing, same time, same day?
Same day, yeah. So we'll have that evening, we'll have two public hearings, one for the updates to the gun ordinance, and then we have updates to our noise ordinance. And this there's a number of changes in our noise ordinance, making adjustment to times and clarifying language about, disrupting, peace, I should say, but also recognizing that we're a growing city, and it's really typical to have a commercial establishment or a retail establishment next to residential. So we try to clarify that. So there's some changes to the distance and how far away from an establishment you need to be if you hear the noise. So hopefully it'll be much more clear, but it's a pretty lengthy ordinance, and it breaks down what's appropriate and what's not when it comes to noise violations.
Okay, so if somebody wants to know a little bit more about that, public hearing is next week on the 12th, a week from tomorrow.
Yep, and you can find both of those ordinances, the draft ordinance language, you can find both of those on the city website.
All right. Well, that went quite fast. That means we're going to break in a minute. We'll be right back. Probably a couple minutes, we'll be back with Commissioner Ruth Kelly. She'll be speaking with the mayor. This is City Connection on GRTV's Livewire Channel 24.
Are you a teen looking for something positive to get involved in? Are you looking for a way to help your community? How about a way to grow and develop your leadership skills? Hello, my name is Monet Glenn, and I am a member of the Above the Influence Kent County Youth Coalition. For the past 13 years, KCPC has been committed to improving the health and wellness of all who call Kent County home. With an emphasis on youth like me, each year KCPC works hand in hand with the country's best and brightest through ATI Youth Coalition. The Youth Coalition meets twice a month to bond, grow, and develop as young leaders of tomorrow. Teens work directly with KCPC leadership to develop a long life leadership skills, substance abuse prevention, education, and key life skills that equipped us to lead our peers in living above the influence of negative behaviors. Each member of the Youth Coalition offers up their time, talents, experiences, and perspectives to help achieve our mission and goals for all Kent County youth. Each year, Youth Coalition plans and gives leadership to the life-changing ATI Kent County Youth Summit. This is an annual event that brings together 1,300 6th to 12th grade students each spring for a full day of high-energy, high-impact off-site learning. Do you have youth in mind who might be a great fit? Yes, we are calling all 6th to 12th graders. Consider this an official invitation to join Cycle 9 ATI Kent County Coalition. We meet every first and third Monday of each month from 3:45 to 5:30 at Network 180. If you are new to the coalition, you will learn much more about how your voice matters in impacting health and wellness for all Kent County teens. For more information, please contact us by calling 616-855-5298 or emailing us at kcpreventioncoalition@gmail.com. See you there!
Hello and welcome back. I'm really happy to have with me today a colleague on my commission, Commissioner Ruth Kelly. We served together on as second ward commissioners for over 6 years up until I ran for mayor, and so we're great partners in the second ward. And so today I wanted to invite Commissioner Kelly to come and talk a little bit about her. Is it 10 years? 10 years on the commission. What it's like to be a commissioner, for those of you who don't know kind of the background on what we do day to day, and then some of the things she's been proud of, and then what's next. Okay. So for folks who don't know you, why don't we start by just a little bit of your history. I know your history, but I think it's a beautiful history of advocacy in the city.
Well, years ago I was a community organizer, and I loved that job. And then I spent a little over 20 years teaching for Grand Rapids Public Schools. And during the course of those years, I worked on several campaigns: Mayor Hartwell's campaign, your campaign, in the 70s, Mary Alice Williams' write-in campaign, and that was amazing. She won in a write-in. And then I ran for City Commission. And it felt a lot like going back to community organizing, only I got to vote this time.
So you've been on the commission, and for folks who don't know what a city commissioner does, why don't you shed some light on what's the day-to-day, what's the scope of the work of a commissioner?
So I break it down into two areas, really: constituent service and then the policy making. So constituent service is pretty much a day-to-day affair. I get calls or emails every day, or now texts, because people text you as well.
Or messages on Facebook or Twitter.
That's right. There's just all kinds of ways to get a hold of us. It's just gotten quite complicated. But so I review all that every day. I can say, the weekends are usually slow, and maybe we don't have anything, but that's sometimes when I'm also catching up on constituent matters. So anything from a yard waste bin that hasn't been delivered, or a refuse container that didn't get picked up, that sort of thing, to a tree in my yard. I'd like to have a tree. It's all over the place.
To flooding in the basement, to flooding on your street.
That's right.
An issue with the neighbor. And
dogs barking, noise ordinance issues.
Fireworks.
Fireworks. Don't get me started on that. By the way, that was not our choice to be able to have these consumer fireworks. That was the state. So Yeah, so I want to always get that out there because
Yeah.
it comes up every 4th of July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the policy making side, obviously we have standing committees. The City Commission meets twice a month. But in addition to that, you serve on other boards and commissions. So you serve on the North Corridor Improvement District.
Right.
And you serve on a whole host of other boards and commissioners as a representative of the City Commission.
That's right. So it's been Michigan Street Corridor. I was on that SID as well for a while, as you know. And I'm with the Kent CAP board. So there are several boards. I was on ACCET for a while.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the issue. And as you know, we have ad hoc committees that meet too. Years ago, we had a committee about customer service, and that led to 311, which
Yeah.
we all love very much.
Yes.
So it really varies. And so there's the policy making piece, which involves a lot of reading, a lot of homework, a lot of debate then around the commission table and decisions. And that's where I think constituent work is so important. So if you can solve problems with your neighbors, with the neighborhood associations and other community groups, then I think it builds trust for the decisions that we have to make around policy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're such a wonderful city commissioner. I'm going to miss you.
Oh, I'll miss you too, Rosalind. But I will be paying attention.
Yes, you will. I may rope you in to still serve on some boards and commissions.
Give me a little bit of a break, please.
So let's talk about 10 years. You've been really active in the Second Ward. When you start to look back, what are some of the projects you've worked on that you're really proud of?
Well, I think a lot of them have to do with the city as a whole. So certainly customer service, 311 was a project that, that of course we all do. We all work on that as commissioners.
But you led on that quite a bit. Yeah.
Certainly the single family certification, which was a bit controversial, but having come out of a teaching profession, I was in the homes of a lot of students, particularly those who rented, and I just understood that's where our children live. They live in a home with a front porch and a backyard. So we came on board just as other nearby cities have done, and we do inspect single family homes that are rentals. Eventually we wound up with this, our eviction prevention. We worked with the district court on that, so I'm really proud of that. And of course, housing was an enormous issue, still is. It's complex, and so I leave that to you to continue that work and to the rest of the commission. And public safety matters, adding civilians to the public safety board was an initiative that I also came out of teaching, really, because of my understanding of our core democratic values. So it's all over the board.
Yeah. And then some of the things you've worked on specific in the Second Ward, you were supportive of Fulton Street Farmers Market redevelopment.
Yes.
The
Which
Plainfield.
you started.
Yeah.
Plainfield Bioretention Islands.
Yeah. You helped with the North Core SID, get that off the ground.
Yes, that was fun.
Yeah, you served on the Michigan Street Corridor Plan, which was extensive.
Yes.
A lot of work went into that. And
made
then
some zoning changes around that to accommodate the needs in the neighborhood.
Yeah. You were active in helping look at securing park space, especially as some of the schools closed down, and how do we make sure that we preserve that park space?
Right, and initially, you'll recall, we had to go out for funding for to keep the pools open. So we made a lot of phone calls, got those open. And of course, we all worked as volunteers during the recession, just raking and spreading chips and painting benches. I had my whole family out helping. They're always so good about that.
And then you've also served on the Urban Forest Committee for years now.
Yes, as their liaison.
Yeah, and so you've helped with our Urban Forest Plan, some of the tree inventories we've done, helping with really just overall the update of the tree ordinance. And then also you've served on Mobile GR. So you've been a part of really rethinking mobility in the city.
Right.
Outside of just parking. You want to talk about that?
Parking, yes, and bicycle lanes. And I just have to say, I know that they can be controversial, but I like to ride my bike and I want it to be safe. And bicyclists are coming, so we have to accommodate them. And now, of course, there's Vision Zero, so we're really concerned about our pedestrians as our city grows and it becomes more dense. And of course, we have to be extra cautious during these months because it gets dark so early and it stays dark longer. So that's a complicated issue. I know that in the future, somebody else is going to have to deal with scooters.
Yes.
You included.
Oh my goodness.
Because they're coming. They're coming to every community, and it's even roundabouts. And it's interesting that it takes time to get used to those. First of all, to figure out how to navigate them. But I've always found that helps to get some information on it. I keep it in my folders, in my computer, and then when people have questions, to send it out, because people will come around if they understand the safety benefits.
Yeah, they sure will. You've also been really involved in civic engagement and talking to people about how to get engaged, why it's important. So we have a few minutes left on this segment. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you think it's so important to get involved in local politics?
Well, I think all politics are local. Was it Tip O'Neill that said that? And I think it's so critical. We are really looking to local government, especially now, to solve a lot of the problems in our very dense areas of the entire nation. And so I think if you are involved, particularly involved at a young age, my parents had me out working, knocking on doors when I was a child, and they did a lot during the civil rights movement. And that instilled in me this expectation that that's just part of life and part of our civic duty. I've done a lot of voter registration. It really matters who you choose. So, I mean, that's why I worked on so many people's campaigns. I think if people want to get involved, particularly either running for election or supporting someone, working on somebody's campaign is just the best way to do that. And then, of course, there's the opportunities to serve on boards and commissions.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've been on the appointments committee for some years, and we're always out there looking for people who want to get on one of our committees, urging them to go online, read the descriptions, and see if it's a good fit for them.
Yeah. Yeah, you've done a lot of good work. We've worked really hard at diversifying our boards and commissions and making sure that they reflect the community that we serve. And really, you've been active in that space and that work.
Yeah.
At least during the time that I've been there. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it opens the door for people. So we did change things a little bit on the committee so that people do have to reapply, and I think for the most part, people understand that you don't want to have a lifetime on one committee. We have to take turns. We have to create space for other people.
Yeah. Although with that said, I'm not a fan of term limits because we will be losing you on the commission, and I think there's real value in having somebody with that kind of historic knowledge and experience on the commission.
Yes, I certainly appreciated that from people. I still talk to all of the former commissioners that served in our ward.
Yeah, me too. It's a lovely thing. And as we close, tomorrow is election day in our city,
right.
So folks in the second ward will be going to the polls and casting a vote to decide who will replace you.
Right, and I understand a lot of people are voting absentee.
Yes.
We've got about 2/3 already, and so that's exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
The beauty of that, and I think to remind people, is if you do sign up for that, then you're automatically going to get a reminder, because it's easy, if you're busy, to miss an election. But if you're signed up for absentee voting, you're going to get something in the mail that reminds you.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. So with that, we'll take a short break and we'll reconvene with Commissioner Kelly to answer some of your questions. Okay, thanks.
Welcome back to City Connection, live in the studio with Mayor Rosalind Bliss and City Commissioner Ruth Kelly. Ruth telling us a little bit about, well, Mayor, you're prodding her because she doesn't brag at all, but a little bit about some of the things that you've done in your time here on the City Commission and even leading up to it. And I asked you off camera, but I want to ask you on, is it a bittersweet thing? And you said a little bit about preparing for the departure, the transition.
Right, of course it is. I'm going to miss my colleagues, and I really enjoy working with city staff. I wish I had a little more time to work with our new city manager. But at the same time, it's, you know, I think it's important to spend time with my family, and the last 10 years they've been very generous and supportive, but I do miss out on things, so I don't want to continue to do that. Life is short, so I'm looking forward to that especially.
Great, and you even mentioned a little bit about transitioning so that other people have opportunities, and that's
Yes.
what you mentioned on all the other kinds of boards and seats that you've been a part of and other people can apply for too.
Right, right. It's great experience. I think it gets into your blood when you do it once and you start to see that you can accomplish something for your own community, your own backyard basically. It gets into your blood, and that's good. The more people that get involved, the better.
One of the things, one of the boards you served on was the Cable Television Advisory Forum.
Yes.
And that was actually when it was in existence, kind of oversaw this organization. I really appreciate your free speech and your public access advocacy that you've done for this community at that sort of
you.
level.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to be able to get on the camera, but we actually have a picture of you when you took our class in 2004.
Really?
Our location TV class.
Really?
And,
Oh,
so-
man.
yeah, you started early with us for sure.
Yes,
but,
and my son took tons of them, and he still is, you know, he's very good at
look
this.
at you, there you are.
Oh my goodness! I love it. Oh wow.
Yeah, so that free speech advocacy started with you getting hands-on at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and you have been a voice for free speech, and we really
Yeah.
do appreciate that. And you're consistent, and you know, in advocacy. Now I hear that it comes from when you were a child, and that your parents were taking you to community events and
Yes.
activities and doors,
Yeah.
going door to door, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I'm going to guess that you recommend that kind of thing be what parents do.
Right. Well, I remember reading when I was still teaching that if you don't engage your children by the time they're 15, it's not as likely that they will be engaged and vote and participate. So I certainly got it. We would always, at the dinner table, we would watch the news together and then discuss it. So
Nice.
grew up with that. And my brother was a political science professor for 51 years at Colorado State, so
Well,
runs in the family.
it does. Tell me how much being an educator influenced how you saw community service.
It certainly influenced my outlook on civilian oversight, participation, because I taught civics. So we would often, because there was a real emphasis on writing for the MEEP tests, we would take issues and we would dissect them and talk about them, and the students would write about them. And we always focused on local issues because it was closest to home. So yeah, I learned along the way. Teaching is the best way to learn. So.
And being
Yeah.
a lifelong learner, I mean, some of these things that you took on starting in 2010, being a city commissioner, serving on all these different boards, really kind of is part of being a lifelong learner. So talk about the learning aspect of being a commissioner.
Oh wow.
It's a large,
That drinking
big
from a
learning
fire
curve.
hose
A
kind
big
of thing.
learning curve. I think one of the
Yeah.
first things you find when you get on the commission is you have all these ideas, and guess what? Somebody else had them. And things are much more complicated than you think, and policy takes a long time to get through. It's complicated, and it's important that you engage all different participants because it's going to affect them. And the most important thing to remember is you're spending taxpayer dollars. It's not your money. So it's really important, and there's a reason that policy takes time, because it's got to be done well, it's got to be done thoroughly, and you do the best you can to anticipate unintended consequences, and then you have to be willing to go back and change the policies if they're not working,
Yeah.
monitor it.
Yeah, and I would add, I remember my first year on the city commission, you just are exposed to and you need to learn about all of these things that are outside of your expertise, right? So you have to learn about the Lake Michigan filtration plant and wastewater and sewer separation and sidewalks and the difference between enterprise fund and general fund and the state laws around those parameters and limitations. And it's a huge learning curve.
It is,
It takes
yeah.
a lot of time to really understand the details and the background and the history of all of the different services that the city provides and how policy, difference between an ordinance and a resolution, and I mean it's a I would say a pretty significant learning curve.
Which is why
People
I think
underestimate
it's concerning that we only have 2 terms, even if we had 3, because it does take so long to learn. And fortunately, with the mayor, she and I worked well together. We would try to share the load as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so it really helps to have a partner in your ward that you can rely on and even think through some of this, ask questions of each other. So, but it's complicated and it takes a ton of time.
Yeah. And I can say it's not, so I had, while I was a city commissioner, I served with 3 different second ward commissioners. And it's not always a great working relationship, or it's not always a good partnership. So having a colleague that you can really work with and make sure you're keeping them in the loop and communicating well and working together on complex issues is so crucial. I can tell you, when I started working with Commissioner Kelly, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was wonderful. Second Ward's been really lucky to have her for so long.
Well, and we had a whole line of great commissioners that we could rely on and ask questions and work with too. So
The experience that you could draw from.
exactly, and I certainly did from Rosalind when because she was there before I was in the ward.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about, we have all 3 wards are having elections, the mayor's position having an election, and of course we keep this show a neutral platform, but just a little bit of advice we know that one of these people in the seat will be brand new, so tell a little bit, what would you give as a piece of advice to somebody coming brand new into the city commissions?
Well, of course, do your homework, and like we did, reach out to former commissioners, and definitely work with your constituents, the groups. Particularly, we're fortunate in the second ward. We have so many organized neighborhood associations because they are experiencing the problems right there in their own home base. So whether it's what they desire in a park space, or what their experience is around water issues or traffic issues, going out there and talking to them directly is so helpful. If you leave people behind, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. And we would meet every month with all of the executive directors and leaders of the neighborhood associations. So it was a great way to just stay abreast of, fill us in on any, crucial issues that are coming up or things we need to know about. And it would give us a chance to provide an update on what we were working on and anything that was coming down the pike at the city that they needed to know about. And then we started doing the neighborhood summit about 5 years ago, and that was a great way to engage all the neighborhoods in that work and really elevate the importance of neighborhoods.
Yeah, it really does help a lot. I continue to meet with our organizers every month, and it's very informal. We don't have a set agenda, but that way, if they've got concerns, they can express them, and then we'll go to city staff, the appropriate city staff, and get answers for them. So I see them as satellite city halls all over the city, and we're working together as long as as long as we continue to communicate.
Yeah,
works well.
When you look to the future for the City of Grand Rapids, you've been involved at this level for quite a while now, but when you look to the future, I heard you mention to the mayor housing is something to carry on, but what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years that are the priority issues for Grand Rapids?
Well, clearly we've already set out our priorities in the strategic plan, and they do include housing, they include public safety, the health and well-being of the community. I'm really pleased that we've added that dimension, that we really are going to look at health in our policies. And certainly the river. And overarching all of that, I think, is how do we do all these things with a lens to equity so that we aren't leaving people behind. It's time for us to rethink how we enact policy, of course, but also practice. So whether it is really working on, like Link, I just learned recently that one of their projects that they got so much minority content, persons of color. So I think we need to learn how to do that better, and I know that under our current leadership around the table at the commission, that will be a priority. Makes me feel really good about my exit.
In a good time and having, What was one of the hardest things you had to deal with as a commissioner, issue-wise, that the whole commission maybe was dealing with, but what was the more hard time that you recall?
I think probably one of the hardest and most thorny issues was the whole housing piece, because of its complexity, and because so soon after a recession where we saw people losing their homes, having to move out of the city, we didn't have a chance really to even figure that out until we had a boom, and then again people being moved out of their homes in the city, and not really having the tools at hand that we would like to have, because we don't have the millions of dollars that need to come from the federal government through the state and to us. And again, policy takes so long. So I think that's probably one of those things where people's shelter is so critical, and it impacts their well-being and their ability to get a job. And then figuring out how do we combine good transportation so that people don't have to spend so much on that or on child care along with housing. So we're still working on this, and I think as a nation we made mistakes in the past. We know we did, with discriminatory practices, and to undo that and to address the loss of generational wealth is just such a big problem. So it's heartrending.
When you think of Grand Rapids, what do you think is our reputation now out in the greater part of the country? You know, we've had a few, we've been noticed for some things that weren't necessarily the right thing. Maybe it is some of that inequity that we're talking about, that it's the battle that goes on. What do you see Grand Rapids' reputation out there being? I think that people see us as innovative, and that obviously we've been growing at a rapid pace. So I know that we have people moving back here, young people who moved away and then found it was way too expensive to live on the East Coast or the West Coast, for example. And they come back and they really appreciate the fact that we're 30 miles from Lake Michigan, that we're working on the river, that there are jobs here, that even though we've got problems, we are trying to solve them. And that I hope, and I do believe, that we're doing a better job at really getting across that we value everyone, that we are a welcoming city. And to the extent we can, that we are doing in-house the kind of hiring that reflects that. Okay. Well, that's a great way to end things out. Thank you for taking the time to be on here. You've actually been a part of hosting this show before, and I thank you for that too.
Yes,
and you've
that's fine,
sat in
Linda.
for the
It's
mayor.
been a joy meeting with you and getting to know you, and it's been 10 years or more apparently.
Yeah, well, when you took that class, for sure.
Yeah,
Well, we
yeah.
thank you for being a part of everything here. You've got 2 more months, though. You're not done, and
Nope.
you've got a
Nope.
lot of work to do, but I look forward
There
to seeing
is.
you out in the community, in spite of maybe not being the commissioner anymore in that ward.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
City
you,
Connection,
Mayor.
we'll take a break. We'll be back shortly.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back for the final segment of this edition of City Connection here on GRTV Livewire Channel 24 with Mayor Rosalind Bliss. We both say thanks to Ruth Kelly sitting in today, but for her time serving on the City Commission as she closes out this year and her final term. She did mention, Ruth mentioned, Commissioner Kelly was talking a little bit about the strategic plan as we were kind of looking at some of the accomplishments and then the direction forward. There's sort of a progress report about the strategic plan recently. It kind of touches on some of the more recent things like human rights ordinance and a few things. Talk about that progress report.
Yeah, so we recently, at one of our October meetings, we had an update on the strategic plan. So the strategic plan, again, it was adopted in March, so this was about a 6-month update. And then it was an update on where we were with making sure that we had metrics in place and a dashboard to be able to show our progress. And so there are 6 pillars, and they include everything from governmental excellence and financial security and stability within the organization to health and wellness. And so some of our goals are around environmental sustainability, making sure that homes are free from lead, air quality, that kind of falls under that pillar. We have goals related to housing, making sure that we are a city where regardless of your income, you can find a place to live and raise your family. And then there are goals around safety. So that incorporates some of our goals around not just within the police department and having a safe community, but also safety, for pedestrians and safety to prevent fires. And so a lot of our goals related to fire prevention fall under that bucket. And then economic development. So there's a lot of goals around making sure that we are an economically strong community. And then there are clear objectives under each one, and then there's a breakdown on how that objective is going to be measured. So how do we know if we're making progress? And then all of the data will be broken down or disaggregated based on race. And then there's some that are broken down geographically as well, just to make sure that there's equity between the wards. So we got an update on that, and then we invested in a new software program called Socrata, which allows us to capture data from different sources and then put that into a dashboard. So now residents can go to this very comprehensive, easy to navigate dashboard that's on the city website, and you can click on the different pillars. You can go in many of the pillars, and for many of the objectives, you can go right into your ward or your neighborhood and look at the data. And so some of the data we're still populating, but a lot of the data is there. So you can go and kind of see where we are, where our benchmark data is, where we hope to be, and then every year you'll be able to see progress that we've made. It's very likely we'll do 6-month updates, but as of right now, we're just populating it with benchmark data and then where we are today.
Okay, so a strategic plan lasts 5 years?
Yeah, this one is a 4-year plan,
Okay.
3 to 5 years.
And do you revise annually and keep that sort of a rolling end date, so to speak?
So what we plan to do, I would say we'll review it. So we actually have a planning process coming up with the full city commission where we'll review the strategic plan again, but it will also give direction to the city manager leading into next year's budget. So I believe that we'll review it every year, probably in December, and then the budget is shared with the commission and the community usually in March, and then it needs to be adopted by the end of May. So I believe that every year we'll do that. It's relatively new, so we'll kind of pivot if we feel like we need to do it differently. But I would say that the strategic plan that we adopted in March will probably not change much over the next year because it is so new.
And after 6 months, what did we learn?
Yeah, so what we learned is that we have a lot of work to do, but we also learned that there's a lot of data out there. And our job is to really figure out how do we make that data meaningful, and then how do we make sure that we have the data that's necessary to look at if we're making progress on some of these objectives. Now, the city years ago, about 2.5 years ago, we adopted an open data policy. So there's a lot of data that we have that's available to the public that isn't necessarily in the dashboard. So we have other data dashboards on the webpage that you can have access to. But the dashboard itself will be specific to breaking down the goals in the strategic plan and progress towards those goals.
Okay, so some early accomplishments yet, or are they all works in progress?
I would say we have made progress when it comes to fire prevention. So we hit over 60,000 smoke detectors being put into homes as part of our fire prevention program. We added carbon monoxide detectors for our kind of under community and police relations. We adopted an updated human rights ordinance, a foreign nationals policy. So I'd say that we're making progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the changes at the city level, things like emergency management position, even kind of time specific, but for this next year, a census coordinator of some sort.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Census has been, we've been working really hard on that. We have a complete count committee, but then we also hired a woman to lead our census work at the city and to collaborate with all of our partners in the community. We also hired 3 neighborhood ambassadors who will go out into neighborhoods where historically we've had a low turnout, and they will be working really side by side with neighborhoods and organizations to help educate folks about the importance of the census. And then we're working really closely with our library and other nonprofits to have kiosks available where individuals can go in and complete their census form, because this is the first year that the census initially will be done electronically. And then people who don't respond electronically, then they'll be followed up with a paper form.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a big deal though. April 1 of next year, we want to make sure everyone is counted.
Okay, and some of the more strong efforts begin January 1. Will people start seeing some
Yes.
mailings about it's coming, be ready,
Yes.
that sort of thing?
Yes. So we're doing a lot of kind of that preliminary work right now, education, working in partnership with folks to make sure that we have really thoughtful, relevant local messages around the census. And then, yeah, next year, January, we'll kind of kick into high gear.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to hear a little bit about that. I was going to refer back to that section of the discussion where we were talking a little bit about the pillars and where we see some areas that might be being left behind. There's some information that came out recently that Third Ward was not seeing the same kind of investment. And just a little insight on that, because I may not have formed that sentence right.
Yeah, so the article focused on data that went back from like 2012 to 2017 and did some comparison data. And actually, some of it was from about a year and a half ago, not this past summer, the summer before. We had a fellow from Harvard come and do some data mining for us, where they compared where economic development tools were utilized, and then mapped that over top of actually our neighborhoods of focus. And there are, so I try to stay away from it being, first, second, or third ward, because what we know from data is that we have 17 census tracts, 17 neighborhoods that cross over between the first and the third ward, where we have historical lack of investment, both public and private, where we have families that don't have access to green space, where we have high unemployment, high number of young people who don't graduate from high school. So we call those at the city, these 17 census tracts, we call them neighborhoods of focus. And for about the last 2 years, we've been working really hard to identify what we need to do to support families in those neighborhoods, but also workforce development, economic development. And we have neighborhood connectors who are focused on those 17 neighborhoods of focus. A lot of our neighborhood matching fund grants have gone to the neighborhoods of focus. And so we know that we have to do things differently, that historically there has been a disinvestment. And we have to be really thoughtful about doing that and making sure that we're doing it in partnership with the neighborhood and the people that live there.
And that it seemingly ties quite closely to the census effort and making sure that everyone is counted. I was going to give you a little bit more opportunity. We've talked before about why the census is so important, but again, just kind of stating that about what it means when it comes to the financial support at the very least.
Yeah, so what some folks don't realize is that census data is utilized in a whole host of ways. And many funding formulas take into account census data. Funding formulas that support funding for our schools, for our community health centers, for our community development block grants. Those are funds that we get from the federal government that support a lot of the work that we do in neighborhoods and our neighborhood associations. the work that we're doing around homelessness and emergency service grants, our crime prevention grants. So what happens is when you have federal money that is funneled down to local communities, there's always a formula that is utilized. And again, whether it's for the city or the county, so the county is impacted, the money that they get for their health department and for community mental health, all of those funds go through a formula where census numbers are utilized for how that fund. Transportation, so transportation dollars even, they will look at the population of a community and that they draw that information from census data. Universities, higher education, census data is so critical to funds coming back. In fact, there was a article put out by the state of Michigan that also is trying to educate people about the census, saying that for every person counted, it is roughly $18,000 that comes back to your community, whether it's for schools, higher ed, health, local unit of government, county. So it's a pretty significant price tag.
Okay, thanks for updating on that.
One of the things I think about with census is that when you're attracting businesses, they also look at census data. So as we try to attract companies to come here, or stay here, or grow here, they too are looking at your census data.
Okay. Well, we've got about a minute and a half to go, maybe a little bit less. We were going to mention college through college, but then close out with election information in terms of polling times and how that's
Thank you.
tomorrow.
So it was just about a week and a half ago that I got together with all of the presidents of the higher education universities and colleges here in our community with a recommitment to supporting the 2 college through college program. So what that is it's a program that's housed in our downtown library, and the staff there work to connect with young people, particularly young people from GRPS, first generation college students, to help them not just get into college, but then to help them be successful. So if they're struggling with something while they're in college, they are a support for them to help them get through college and actually graduate. So it's a wonderful program. Thousands of students have participated, and they're showing some real great positive results for those students.
Great. 10 seconds to go to say tomorrow is election day.
Tomorrow's election day, so 7 a.m. polls will be open. Please get out and vote. As you said, we have local elections in every ward. We also have a dedicated parks millage on the ballot, so please get out and vote. Polls close at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Hopefully results will come in shortly after that, and we'll know by Wednesday what the results are.
Great. Mayor Rosalind Bliss here on City Connection, GRTV's Livewire, Channel 24. I'm Linda Galash.